Hello everybody and welcome to TJ's Lego Room, and today, for the fourth week in a row, I get to say you're welcome, Galaxy, because I have some free instructions up on Rubricable.com right now. Those free instructions were actually up a couple of days ago, so anybody who followed me on Rubricable would already see these instructions and already know what's coming for the video this week. And if you were on Patreon, you knew even before that because I finished the instructions on Monday and put up a bunch of pictures on Patreon for that. So you're very welcome. I hope you guys are having a great time. But before we go any farther, I will just quickly mention the Razorcrest MkII contest is in full swing. I'm giving away a Razorcrest Lego set. So if you want a chance to win that, go ahead and join, all right? There should be a link down below for the contest. But let's get into the reason you're here, right? This guy. This is the TIE RD, or sometimes I call it the TIE Shark, or the underwater TIE. I'm not a huge fan of the TIE Shark name. That obviously is a pretty lazy naming convention for this particular one. But I kind of wanted it to be a very simple TIE fighter, and so just calling it the underwater TIE or the TIE RD. I think that worked pretty good. The RD actually is kind of a shortened version of the word rudder. That I actually came up with that name before I even just started designing it, but we'll get into that in a minute. So originally I started designing this based off of some concept art from episode 7, The Force Awakens. There was a picture of some TIE fighters, and hopefully I have it on screen for you right now, of some TIE fighters that just looked wrong for some reason. Eventually I determined it was because they had those giant round open air jet engines, and TIE fighters don't really have those. But I started thinking, why would a TIE fighter have those? What would the purpose of that be? Obviously in universe it wouldn't make sense because the TIE engines don't work that way. They collect solar energy and then propel ions out of their thrusters. So they're more like I can't even think of anything. More like a rocket engine than a jet engine, so they wouldn't have air intakes. But if you took that underwater, it would need some sort of an intake if it was propelling itself using the force of the water. And so that's what I decided to do. I decided to make underwater jet engines similar to like a jet ski or a wave runner. And so this is what I came up with. I started with the ball section of the cockpit, so let's look at that real quick. This is very much the 2021 version of the TIE Fighter. I tried to use a lot of the parts from the 2021 TIE on this. However, you're still going to need extra parts besides the 2021 TIE. Obviously, the engines are a big part of that. They don't have any of those pieces in it. I also added quite a few pieces in the ball section, especially when I turn it upwards like this. You can see there's a whole additional section on the back of it. But then obviously the engines are. I believe, however, most of the wings are from the set. So you will be able to get a lot of the sets, a lot of the parts for this set from the 2021 TIE. I believe it or not, I actually went through after designing it originally and tried to change out some of those parts so that they used the 2021 TIE Fighter parts instead. So I hope you appreciate the extra work that went into that. So the ball, like I said, is pretty similar. There are a few changes. I really think that the windscreen on the original 21 fighter is pretty off center where I think it should be on the ball. So I did lower that, and then I changed the outer sections. You look at the instructions, you'll see that. I'm just proud of my work. Obviously, there are a few major changes that you'll notice. The first one would be these TIE cannons, these laser cannons there. I ended up using the flick fire missiles stuck into some hollow 1x1 round studs, or 1x1 round plates, I should say. And I did that because when I was researching underwater vehicles and weapons in Star Wars, the weapons tended to have an extended, like a longer look to them, almost like a pike. The Mon Cala, a lot of their weapons were long and thin, and so I wondered if that had something to do with the properties of firing a laser underwater. So I extended the laser emitters out forward and just made them hollow. I didn't put any any green studs on the end. Just because when I was watching it, I was inspired by that. All right, so then on the back of the pod, because these are going underwater, I knew that there were going to be different properties that you would need to account for as opposed to going into space. So not only are the wings more aerodynamic, but on the ball section, in space, you can have a guy in a spacesuit, and it really doesn't matter if the inside of the starfighter is filled with vacuum like the TIE fighters would. They had no life support systems, so that's why the TIE pilots wore those air suits and had full body protection in their TIE fighters, is because basically they were open to space on the inside in a lot of ways. So because you're going underwater, though, you need to be able to have that space pressurized. And so I imagine the back here would be housed a bunch of life support equipment. So the pilots of these TIE fighters wouldn't need all that extra personal gear, because going underwater they would have the life support systems available to them. Then on the underside, on back here, we actually have one of my classic TIE fighter energy cells. Just some 2x2 round transparent light blue bricks. And that was because you wouldn't obviously be able to collect the solar energy that the regular TIE fighter is able to do with their panels. So you'd have to rely a lot more on cells, power cells. So I went ahead and put a power cell on the bottom side of the ship. Now, if you look, I actually still do have some ion thrusters underneath, and the wings are still panels, solar panels. The reason I did that was because I imagined that you would drop these from like a Gazanti or from a Star Destroyer or possibly an Architins like Moff Gideon's, and they would need to come out of the ship, the carrier they were on, and travel down to the surface of the water and then under. And then when they came back, they would have to come up out of the water. So it does have some not as fast TIE fighter engines, but it also let me keep the TIE designation, not just because of the look, but these actually still do have twin ion engines on them. I guess if I really thought a little more about it, I could have called this, instead of a TIE, I could have come up with a different acronym because it uses the jet engines. So like a twin jet engine fighter, twin jet engine, a Che. Oh, no, it's not working. All right, so once I got the center ball done, I didn't do the back at the beginning, but I did have the center ball done. I started working on these wings, and believe it or not, well, of course you're going to believe it, I'm saying it. Oh, I am sorry, guys. This is going to be a wacky video. It's not even late. It's seriously like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, as you can tell by my watch that I looked at. Wow, I am more loopy now than usual. I am so sorry, guys. Okay, so the wings I actually started flipped. So they were actually backwards before, where I had the long section of it in front of the jet engines, in front of the turbines. And I can't remember exactly why I did that, but I know it had something to do with Doug Chiang, the designer of Star Wars, and George Lucas. When George talked to Doug Chiang, he said that he has to be able to look at a ship and immediately know which direction it goes, where the pilot sits, and tell a lot about the ship just by the first glance at it. So when I was first designing this, I realized that if I had the interceptor-like wings, as you can see, the top and bottom sections kind of look like the interceptors. If I had those going backwards, it would confuse people on which direction the ship was going. But when I built the engines and the wing together, it actually looked like it was backwards from doing it the way I thought. So if you imagine that the ship was actually going this direction, so it's where it's going now, it would be backwards, that still doesn't look totally right. And so by flipping the wings backwards from where I had originally designed, I realized that that this direction looked a lot better and actually made more sense. And I think it had to do with that original naming convention that I have, which is the TIE rudder, which means that you have some sort of a fin behind the engine that directs you. And so in the end, I ended up putting the wings the fins behind the engine. And underwater, it actually makes more sense this way. So I hope it worked for you guys. Let me know if it didn't. Let me know if you still think that the wings should be flipped around. But honestly, I think that the ship actually makes more sense this direction visually. So thank you, Doug Chain and George Lucas. The engines only went through a couple of iterations, and most of that had to do with the fact that I couldn't attach these wings onto the engines very easily. So I ended up having to change them a couple times to get them really solid. And in the end, I think they do a great job, and it is quite sturdy. I'll do a little mock test here for you and show you how sturdy they are. Obviously, it's held on by Technic pins, but the wings are actually quite sturdy. So if I pop that off, it can rest on the wings here. I can put it upside like that. I can set it there. It's obviously very, very wobbleable. I'm hitting, let's see if we can zoom out just a little bit here. Oh, all right. And you can see it actually moves and handles extremely well. The back end of the cockpit, this extra section, can hold it. I usually don't hold it from that because it is held on just by studs snotting. There's no extra support there, so it can fall off if you're being really rough with it. So I usually grab it from the underside near the tie engines, but then I can use this as a little thumb handle to fly it around and have some fun. And that's pretty much it. This ship, I'm really excited for. I think it looks amazing. I'm so shocked that it came together so well. I'm glad I was able to get this outside line. And while that did affect how I built the ship, it actually didn't change the overall shape very much at all. It was actually, I actually pretty much started with this shape in mind and then gradually changed it. Now that I look at it, like if you were looking at it from this direction, like if it was traveling towards the camera this way, it's not terrible. But I still think that with the ball inside, I think it really does help you know which direction it goes. And yeah, I think it worked out pretty well. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you guys have a great weekend. And until I see you next time in TJ's Lego Room, or you see me more accurately, play well. Bye. See that? I remembered to wave. I remembered to wave that time.